Success is supposed to feel good, right? But here you are, CEO, C-suite executive, running a multi-million-dollar company, and you feel like something fundamental is missing, despite checking every box society told you would make you happy. I've worked with over 200 senior executives who felt exactly this way. On paper, they had everything. In reality, they were drowning in chronic stress, leadership isolation, and an annoying sense that their identity was built on quicksand. The thing is, most of the advice out there about finding fulfillment is bullshit. Meditation apps, executive coaches who've never done the depth work, self-help books that give you strategies but never address the root psychology. None of it actually works. So in this video, I'm going to show you the real fundamentals that most successful leaders are missing. The ones that actually create lasting inner peace, authentic power, and liberated fulfillment. And fair warning, this isn't your typical practice gratitude and take deep breaths video. We're going deep into the psychology, the nervous system work, the shadow integration that actually transforms how you experience your life and leadership, the success emptiness paradox. So let's start with the big one. Why success feels so empty in the first place? Most executives think the next milestone will bring satisfaction, the next revenue target, the next promotion, the exit. But what actually happens? You get a brief hit of dopamine, and then within days or weeks, you're right back to feeling empty. You set another goal, and then another, and the cycle never ends. The fundamental mistake here is believing the problem is which goal you're pursuing, when the real issue is that you're using goals as a proxy for your worth and identity. I had a client, senior executive, who achieved major success, company sale, life-changing money, the whole thing. But instead of feeling fulfilled, he felt completely empty. And the moment that shifted everything for him was when he finally confronted the question, who am I without the story? Who am I if I'm not the guy building the company? When you understand that fulfillment doesn't come from achievement, but from alignment between your actions, your values, and your authentic self, everything changes. This is what I call liberated fulfillment. You're not building from a place running from emptiness anymore. You're building from presence. Now, to make this shift, you have to get honest about what you've been using success to avoid. For most executives, it's a feeling of inadequacy that were formed in early childhood. Never being good enough for a parent, having to be the responsible one. Whatever it was, those patterns are still running you today. The work here is reconnecting with your intrinsic value. What matters to you, independent of status or money. This requires contemplative practices and often Jungian exploration to uncover what's been buried for decades. Nervous system dysregulation. Now let's talk about why you can't actually relax even when you want to. Most executives think their stress is situational. Once this quarter is over, once we close this deal, once I hire the right person or people, but stress never actually goes away. And that's because your nervous system is stuck in chronic fight or flight activation. Think about it. Years of high pressure decisions, constant vigilance, always being on. This is literally rewired how your body operates. You're living in sympathetic overdrive all the time, which means even when you're on vacation, your body doesn't know how to downregulate. Your mind might be racing still at 2 a.m. You can't sit still. You feel guilty when you're resting. I worked with an executive who couldn't sleep despite trying everything. Apps, supplements, therapy, you name it. And within our first few sessions, we identified that his nervous system was so activated that his body literally didn't feel safe to sleep. Think about that. His body was so conditioned to be on high alert that it couldn't even rest. We did somatic work, breath work, body scanning, polyvagal exercises, and the timeline of results was remarkable. Not just with sleep, but with everything. His decision-making improved, his relationships improved, he stopped snapping at people. Because here's the thing, when your nervous system is regulated, everything improves. Your decision-making sharpens because you're not operating in reactive mode. Your relationships improve because you're not bringing that frantic energy everywhere. You actually get more done because you're working from clarity instead of cortisol. This is the foundation of what I call inner peace, not as some abstract woo-woo concept, but a physiological state where your body feels safe enough to access your full capacity. Now, the changes here require somatic interventions, not just mental techniques. We're talking breath work like coherent breathing or box breathing, cold exposure, vagus nerve stimulation, learning to track sensations in your body without immediately trying to fix or escape them. And the key is consistency, 10 to 15 minutes daily. That's it. You'll notice a difference within 2 to 3 weeks. The racing mind slows down, the reactivity decreases, and you start to feel like yourself again. By the way, if you want to dive deeper into everything I'm covering in this video, I've created a full-length self-mastery course specifically for CEOs and senior executives. Click the link in the description to access it. The loneliness of leadership. All right, let's talk about something no one wants to really admit. How lonely is it at the top? Here's what most people don't understand. The loneliness of leadership isn't about not having enough people around you. It's about the complete inability to be vulnerable. When you're the CEO, the founder, the person everyone looks to for answers, you can't admit doubt, you can't admit fear, you can't admit that sometimes you have no idea what you're doing. So you wear a mask, and over time that mask becomes a prison. I had a founder come to me, managing a large team, appeared incredibly successful from the outside, and in our first session he completely broke down. He said, "I feel like a fraud. I don't know if I'm making the right decisions, and I can't tell anyone because if they knew how uncertain I feel, they'd lose confidence in me." This is the silent struggle of leadership. Everyone sees the confidence, the vision, the decisiveness. No one sees the 3 a.m. panic attack or the self-doubt that gnaws at you. And you can't share it with your team. You can't share it with your board sometimes. You can't even share it with your spouse because they're already worried about you. So we created a container where he could be completely honest without judgment. And over time, he had this realization. His uncertainty wasn't a weakness. It was wisdom. It was his psyche telling him to slow down and examine his blind spots instead of just bulldozing forward like he always did. And here's the paradox. When you have a space to be fully honest with a coach, a therapist, even a trusted advisor, you stop carrying that weight alone. The psychological burden that you've been carrying 24/7 gets lighter. And when you stop trying to appear certain all the time, you actually become a better leader because you're making decisions from clarity rather than ego. This is the part that I call authentic power, the ability to lead from a grounded place rather than the need to prove yourself or maintain an image. Now, the shift starts with finding one person, someone with no stake in your company, where you can be completely transparent, not your board, not your team, not necessarily even your wife, someone whose job it is to hold space for your full humanity. And then you practice vulnerability in doses. You don't have to break down in front of your entire team, but you can start acknowledging uncertainty in small ways. I don't have the answer yet, but here's how we'll figure it out as an example. That kind of leadership is far more powerful than pretending you have it all together. Shadow work and unconscious patterns. Now we're going to get into something most executive coaches won't touch or shadow. Most executives think personal development is about adding more skills, more strategies, more tools. But real transformation, that happens when you stop running from the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the aspects of your personality that you've rejected, repressed, or disowned. For most executives, that's things like vulnerability, neediness, anger, jealousy, fear. You learned early on that these weren't acceptable, especially if you wanted to be successful. So you buried them, but they didn't go away. They just started running you unconsciously. Maybe you're conflict avoidant because you're terrified of being seen as aggressive. Maybe you overwork because you're scared of being seen as lazy. Maybe you micromanage because you don't trust yourself or others. These aren't character flaws, they're adaptive strategies you've developed to survive. But now they're sabotaging your effectiveness as a leader. I worked with a CEO who had this pattern of explosive reactions during high pressure moments. He'd apologize afterwards, promise to do better, but the pattern kept repeating. And we traced it back to childhood beliefs and dynamics he never examined. His father was volatile, and he'd internalized this belief that anger equals power, that if you're not dominating, you're being dominated. Through shadow work, he began to see that what was actually underneath those reactions. And once he integrated that part of himself, once he could sit with what he'd been running from for decades, the explosions stopped. Not because he was suppressing them, but because he'd actually developed emotional regulation instead of just white-knuckling it. When you integrate your shadow, you stop being controlled by it. You gain access to your full emotional capacity, which makes you a more effective and present leader. You stop sabotaging yourself. You stop repeating the same destructive patterns, and you start leading from wholeness instead of fragmentation. Now, this work requires going into the parts of yourselves you've been avoiding. And it usually means working with a coach or therapist trained in depth psychological work, not someone who's just going to give you strategies or just go through mental stories, but someone who can help you explore the unconscious. Practices include active imagination, dream work, and examining your triggers. That's just the tip of the iceberg. And here's the key. When you have a disproportionate emotional reaction to something, that's how your shadow is showing up. Instead of pushing it away or rationalizing it, lean in. What part of me is this activating? What am I defending against? It's not comfortable work, but it's the difference between being run by your psychology and being liberated from it. Authentic power versus ego-driven leadership. Let's talk about power, real power, versus the kind that's exhausting you. Most executives think power comes from control, from being the smartest person in the room, from dominating. But that's ego-driven power, and it's exhausting. It requires constant vigilance. You have to maintain an image. You need external validation to know you're doing okay. Authentic power is completely different. It comes from presence, from groundedness, from inner stability. It's the kind of power that doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't need to be the loudest voice. It doesn't collapse when someone disagrees with you. The mistake most executives make is confusing confidence with certainty. They think they need to have all the answers, that admitting they don't know something is weakness. But real confidence, that's being okay with not knowing. It's trusting yourself to figure it out. I worked with a founder who ran his entire company through sheer force of will. Brilliant guy, charismatic, terrified underneath it all. Every decision was a referendum on his worth. If something went wrong, he internalized it as personal failure. If someone questioned him, he took it as a personal attack. We worked on separating his identity from outcomes. He learned to lead from a place of curiosity instead of defensiveness. He started asking his team, "What am I missing?" instead of telling them what to do. And the shift was remarkable. Not only did morale improve, but the company started making better decisions because he wasn't bottlenecking everything through his ego anymore. When you develop authentic power, leadership becomes effortless. You're not constantly managing your image. You're not exhausted from having to be on all the time. You can be decisive without being domineering. You can be strong without being rigid. And people follow you not because they fear you, but because they trust you. This requires building a relationship with your inner observer, a part of you that can witness your reactions without being hijacked by them. Practices include mindfulness meditation to develop that witness consciousness, journaling to track patterns and see where you're being reactive, and working with a coach to examine where your need for control is actually rooted in fear. The goal isn't to eliminate the ego, it's to stop letting it run the show, the helping trap and delegation. All right, last one, and this is going to sting a bit. Here's something most executives won't admit. The real reason you can't delegate isn't because no one can do it as well as you. The real reason is that being needed makes you feel valuable. If you're not the one solving every problem, if you're not the indispensable one, this is what I call the helping trap. You're not actually helping your team by doing everything yourself. You're disempowering them, but you keep doing it because it gives you a sense of control and purpose. It makes you feel important. I worked with a CEO who was working 80-hour weeks despite having a completely competent executive team. And every time we tried to identify what he could delegate, he'd say, but what if they mess it up? What if it doesn't get done right? But underneath that, what we eventually uncovered was that his entire identity was wrapped up in being indispensable. If he wasn't needed, he feared he'd become irrelevant. Once he confronted that fear, once he could sit with the discomfort of it, he was able to start actually delegating. Not just tasks, but authority, real authority. And within 3 months, he'd cut his hours in half while the company performed better than ever because his team was finally empowered to make decisions. When you break the helping trap, you free yourself and you empower your team. You get your time back. Your team develops real confidence, your team develops real competence and ownership, and you can focus on the high leverage activities that only you can do: vision, strategy, culture. The shift starts with identifying where you're rescuing instead of coaching. Where are you jumping in to save the day when you should be letting someone struggle through it and learn? Where are you doing things that someone else could do 80% as well, which would be good enough? When you practice sitting with the discomfort of letting go, when someone on your team struggles, you resist the urge to jump in. You coach them through it instead. And yes, this will feel uncomfortable at first. You'll feel guilty, anxious, like you're failing them, but you're actually serving them by letting them grow. The key is distinguishing between help, which builds capacity, and enabling, which creates dependency. Make sure you're doing the former, not the latter. The information in this video has the power to completely change your leadership and inner life, but there's a lot more depth to each of these areas that I could cover here. That's why I created a full free self-mastery course where I walk through the exact step-by-step process to experience inner peace, authentic power, and liberated fulfillment, including the specific practices, frameworks, and psychological techniques that clients pay thousands for. Click the video on the screen right now to watch the full course. And if you want to work with me directly, click the first link in the description to apply. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more on executive coaching transformation, and I'll see you in the next one.